African people are actually built on the bodies of enslaved Africans as well.
These are monuments built on top of unmarked graves. But he does not want to knock down the symbols of the past.
I'm not a fan of tearing down, so I would like to see interpretive plaques put on these monuments to tell people who these individuals were and the role that they played in slavery and the slave trade.
Westgaff is working with Gore to do exactly that. And, for the first time, erect a public memorial to the victims of slavery. Salma Abdulaziz, CNN, Liverpool.
Well, that wraps this hour of CNN Newsroom. I'm Kim Brunhuber. Up next, it's New Day.
And you know, that's really sad because that ideology, like I said, was spread all over the world to the degree of white supremacists in thinking that they was the supreme race above and beyond all other races. I myself have been offended in their deep roots of what they stood for, even though we had ancestors in the past that was a part of the Confederacy. A matter of fact, you can look on the back of my tombstone that has already been pre-selected and made, as well as my brothers, towards being the sons of Confederacy. Not that we're proud of what had happened, but stating the fact that we are branded as part of the Sons of Confederacy, regardless whether we like it or not. You know, we can't choose who our ancestors was. We can't choose in what our ancestors done versus what they didn't do that they should have done. We can't make these choices for them, and at the same time, we can't deny if we've had ancestry that has been a part of such of a cruel, indifferent, abolishing form. We can't deny the fact that, you know what, we did have some people in our family that was cruel, that was messed up, that was brainwashed, that was on the wrong side of history. And it's not just that way in my particular family, but in hundreds of thousands of families all over America, as well as parts of Europe, England, and all throughout the world. I personally believe that whenever discrimination first started being identified as being a separation between cultures, began back in the Egyptian era, whenever the Egyptians, the pharaohs, turned Moses and Moses' people into slaves, in thinking that it was okay to enslave people for their own benefits. I think that that's whenever the discrimination come into play, towards thinking, well, if I'm white, I'm supreme over you, and you're supposed to bow down to me because I'm a white man. Even Jesus himself was not white. Jesus himself was in between a white and a black man, pertaining to his culture of where he come from during the time that he was born and walked among us as a true human being. It's really disheartening to think that so many people have got this ego in thinking a misguided thought that they are above and beyond any other race, regardless whether it be Chinese, Japanese, Canadian, Cuban, Russian, Australian, Ireland. I mean, I could go on and on and on with various races throughout this planet and cultures that we're all supposed to be equal. But that ain't how that history started out. History started out in a very, very demoralizing way, to the degree of trying to make goddesses out of humans that never was supposed to have been any form of a goddess, just because of the color of your skin or just because of who you are towards where you was born at. Let's see what else we can find out here on the
essentials.
grand scale
Like you're being sucked into it. Your loved one may have left this earth,
of our morning news.
but they'll never leave your heart.
Facing a series of crises over the pandemic, the economy, racial injustice, and climate change, Biden said the November election will be life-changing.
This will determine what America is going to look like for a long, long time. Character is on the ballot. Compassion is on the ballot. Decency, science, democracy, they're all on the ballot.
Because of the pandemic, Joe Biden has no plans to hit the road for a traditional post-convention tour. For his part, President Trump's expected to travel to North Carolina on Monday, where the official portion of the Republican convention kicks off.
Our thanks to Peter Alexander there in Wilmington.
All right, now let's get to ex-Trump associate Steve Bannon. Defiant, a day after his indictment on federal fraud charges, the former top White House aide vowing to fight back. He's claiming that he's the victim of a political hit job.
NBC's Jeff Bennett is in Washington, D.C. with more on this. Jeff, what did he have to say?
Come out of the courtroom smiling, grinning ear to ear, like a possum. Proud of the fact that he has cheated thousands, possibly millions of people fraudulently out of money. I have never seen this type of behavior before that really is bothersome, because most of the time whenever somebody gets caught with their hand in a cookie jar and they realize that their hand's been caught in a cookie jar, they're ashamed of the fact that they got caught with their hand in a cookie jar. And if they wasn't ashamed of no other reason, they was ashamed of the fact that they got caught. These people are not even ashamed that they've gotten caught, much less ashamed of the act that they're being charged for. I've never seen a colder, bolder, uglier society than what we're looking at today, whenever people break the law, all in the name of greed.
Steve Bannon faces federal charges that he siphoned off some hundreds of thousands of dollars from some hundreds of thousands of donors who contributed to this border wall project. But now Bannon says that he's the subject of a politically motivated attack.
Steve Bannon, President Trump's now indicted former chief strategist, dismissing his Thursday arrest on federal fraud charges as politically motivated.
This fiasco yesterday was to intimidate anybody that wants to talk about American sovereignty and wants to talk about the wall.
Bannon out on $5 million bail and back on his podcast.
I'm not going to back up 1 inch. All these charges are nonsense. It's a political hit job. I really appreciate the overwhelming support.
Bannon arrested aboard a $28 million yacht owned by a Chinese billionaire. Prosecutors say Bannon and 3 others raised more than $25 million in a campaign they said would go entirely to build sections of the southern border wall. Donors were solicited online and at town halls.
I saw a note come through that said we might have an opportunity to sponsor the various steel pillars that will be used in the fence. I think the sponsorship was $1,000 a piece. And I'd personally be interested in about 14 of those for my family.
But the government says the defendants actually defrauded hundreds of thousands of donors and took hundreds of thousands of dollars for their personal benefit.
Now, Steve Bannon is just the latest close Trump associate to face criminal charges. There's also Paul Manafort, the former campaign chairman, Rick Gates, the former deputy campaign chairman, Roger Stone, a longtime former aide to President Trump, Michael Cohen, his former fixer, and also Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor, guys.
Wow, the list goes on and on and on. I will say this: of all of those defendants you've mentioned, Steve Bannon has the best blowout. It just flowed. The hair.
It's the summer lovin'.
Is it the air off of Connecticut on a yacht? That's what happens.
Perhaps, right? Yeah. Good to see you guys.
Appreciate it. NBC's Jeff Bennett there in Washington for us.
Let's talk about the breaking news in the emergency out west. Wildfires scorching tens of thousands of acres in
This is absolutely awful. Listen to this heartbreak here.
California as crews struggle to get things under control there. The unusual way they're fighting the flames, that will be just ahead.
Plus, a battle over the president's tax returns may be heading to the Supreme Court sooner than you would have expected.
Be able to help.
This summer.
Trade I'm looking to make here is going out to the October 2nd week.
This sacred duty is my #1 priority between now and election.
University of Phoenix is awarding up to one.
We're doing it again. It's the most successful period of time in the history of our country, from every standard. Where Joe Biden sees American darkness, I see American greatness. No party can lead America that spends so much time tearing down America.
A season of darkness. You heard the president refer to Joe Biden's speech as one that focuses on the tough times we're living through right now. What I would say is they're actually focusing also on an indictment of America. The darkness, Pete, is something they suggest goes deep into our history, deep into the core of who we are. And I hope that the Republican National Convention reiterates how great this country has been and can be again.
I think it's a great point. They're basically saying we've always been dark. Elect Joe Biden and the clouds.
Across the north central again, seeing those dry weather feels around, say, Nebraska, back into Omaha, that is. And then further north around spotty storms across the arrowhead there of Minnesota and the UP of Michigan. There will be a little bit of activity there, but dry weather is going to be the big weather story for many. Chicago as well. Some storms possible for Minneapolis, parts of Minnesota that really need to see a little bit more rain. Then Chicago clear. Tonight, we're in the upper 60s. As for the Northwest, very comfortable conditions continue here. Nothing too hot, but the heat does continue further south. And speaking of, well, the further south you go, well, we still have some heat in place. How about the 90s there? Hazy sunshine in Boise, but much cooler around Seattle in the mid-70s. Into the night we go, we're in the 50s for Portland under clear skies. Nice looking stuff. Heat is on here across the Southwest. More of the record-challenging heat possible. High fire danger as well. Triple-digit heat for you in Las Vegas.
Lisa needs this. And President Trump.
Course to success.
About the strategy of the Democratic ticket.
Republican National Convention begins Monday at 7 on MSNBC.
President's comments, even though for any other president that would be, groundbreaking or completely out of line in terms of the kind of language he's used. But I think they've realized that the American people have gotten used to the president using language like nasty and mad woman and horrible and terrible and, all this sort of aggressive language against Kamala Harris. So they're trying to pivot and
state. Firefighters are facing a tough weekend ahead as they try to bring some of those huge wildfires under control.
Hundreds of homes have been lost so far, and more than 100,000 people have been evacuated. We know 6 deaths as of this morning. Let's go to
100,000 people evacuated.
NBC's Steve Patterson.
As flames devour neighborhoods and incinerate farmlands, bone-tired firefighters turn to the sky for help. The attack from above is crucial because the terrain is like a minefield. Gas tanks rage out of control like blowtorches, electric poles scorched, crews fighting fire with fire, trying to choke off the spread with controlled burns. Desperate measures to stop the inferno from reaching more homes.
We left, and this is what we came home to today.
At least 6 people have already died in an all-out battle against the blaze. In just the last week, fires have scorched through more than 70,000 acres, surpassing the state's average loss for an entire year. Fires across the Bay Area rage on with minimal containment.
All we can say is that
We can't save everything.
More than 500 structures reduced to ash, more than 100,000 evacuated.
You could hear this swirling or swishing of air and just going crazy and explosions going off.
Blankets of thick smoke now smother the region.
The fire ain't gonna kill you, it's gonna be the smoke that's in the valley.
As the Shia fire continues its unpredictable spread, the only certainty is more destruction.
That was NBC's Steve Patterson reporting for us. He will join us in the next hour with a live update on what the situation is out there. But in the meantime, we're continuing to follow several developing stories. It's not fire, but at this time, a lot of rain.
Yeah, more breaking news. The Gulf Coast on alert for 2 tropical systems. At the same time, Tropical Storm Marco on the left strengthening a little bit overnight to forecast, I should say, to make landfall somewhere around Texas. Tropical Storm Laura is on the right. It's over the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico today. Both storms are forecast to strengthen in the Gulf to become hurricanes, which would be a historic first.
The National Weather Service gave an update just within the last hour. They plan to do so again within the next couple of hours. The storms haven't necessarily strengthened overnight. One of them, Marco, has gained a little bit of speed and some strength. So the Gulf Coast, all of the Gulf Coast needing to pay attention to these storms.
Yeah, especially the timing of both of them.
Well, after nearly 4 years, the battle over President Trump's taxes will come down to...
Let's talk about the raging wildfires in California that burned nearly 500,000 acres. We are there as firefighters are now trying to stop more homes from being destroyed.
And not one, but 2 official tropical storms now in the Atlantic are headed toward the Gulf Coast. Meteorologist Allison Chinchar is tracking those storms. She'll tell us when and where they're expected to make landfall.
That's exactly right. It's rules for thee, but not for me. And this is why there's such another great contrast among many between Joe Biden and President Trump. Joe...
Get the area rug. Everything you need with free shipping every day. Easy, right? Getting it done with Overstock, where quality costs less.
Nice. This is the new Buick?
I think you mean the new Alexa.
That comes into the same vicinity. I'll show you that momentarily. So again, plentiful rain for the weekend there across the Yucatan, then up to the Gulf Coast from, say, eastern Texas towards Louisiana. As of right now, into the midweek to come, could be seeing 4 to 8 inches. AccuWeather local storm max, maybe a foot, depending on how this storm sets up. So get ready for some tropical activity there in the coming days across the Gulf Coast. Let's kind of come back here across the islands, though, from Puerto Rico, or should I say stemming back from the U.S. Virgin Islands to Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and the Turks and Caicos here, the potential for tropical storm force conditions as we see it unravel over the next couple of hours here and then into the second half of the weekend. So we're going to be watching the storm itself through Puerto Rico. Here we go on your Saturday morning, and then into the Dominican Republic, crossing throughout Cuba. But the question is, does the storm actually stay over land the whole time, or at least mostly over land? That's going to keep it a tropical storm versus going into hurricane force. But then into the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico, and then again, strengthening to a potential hurricane here, impacting the Gulf Coast. And remember, oil refineries, yep, that could be an issue too, as we head forward, and how that, actually impacts our output and also cost for gas. So that's got to think about that in the future as well. But as of right now, again, what are we watching here? Well, 2 storms that could literally come into the same area, but will they work off of each other? Well, more or less what you're probably going to see is one storm will become a little bit more on the weaker side, while the other will be maybe the bigger of the 2. So we have to see how this kind of plays out. Either way, the Gulf Coast is going to be quite the busy spot, and the area that we're going to be watching very closely as we head into the weekend and especially into the early part of the week. But it's kind of replicating what we've been talking about. When we look at the activity, really, uptick in tropical activity from the windwards all the way out towards the Gulf of Mexico, crossing over the Yucatan here. Reduced wind shear, increasing moisture, and very, very warm waters. We're talking about bathtub-like water here that will, again, bring into this uptick in tropical activity. So this time of year gets quite busy. All right, let's go to the Southwest. We've been watching the Southwest, and specifically the fires going on across the Southwest that will burn, or continue to burn here around just south of L.A. We have contained...
You know, just about a week ago, I don't forgot now what state it was. I think it was up towards Idaho. They got hit by over 100-mile-an-hour winds that just devastated their agriculture communities with the wind damage. Plus, they got all kinds of flooding. Whenever you look and analyze this from ground zero, as a spectator looking into a crystal ball, I'm going to use the word crystal ball. Whenever you have one major humongous event that's contradictory to the next major event, but one is just as forceful and is just as costly as the other one, you got to understand that it's as if we are under some sort of a spiritual siege. Because these events ordinarily only took place about once every 100 years. And now we're having 2 or 3 events happen simultaneously back to back, and sometimes 2 or 3 events happening simultaneously at the same time. That one can be just as devastating in the flood domain as it is the fire domain pertaining to the drought. And then if you look at the tropical storms pertaining to the hurricanes, there's no doubt in my mind that no one should argue the fact that global warming has affected our natural resources that comes from the heavens pertaining to how our atmospheres targets land masses that can absolutely be devastating to not only can it be devastating to buildings and real estate, but it can be devastating in people's lives. If someone would have told me whenever I was born in 1961, in the late 60s or the early 70s, that I was going to see these type of radical weather massive events take place in my life as a child growing up, I would have told them that you're nuts. You're crazy. If somebody would have told me that we would have had as many as 500 or 600 tornadoes break out in one day, that has happened here in America at different periods of time, I would have told them, you're nuts. You're crazy. But as we're watching the weather wreak out, just as the Bible talks about, for it will be as a woman giving birth, having travail of the sin, the wickedness that man has brought upon to this society. Whenever we see this right in front of our very eyes, it's absolutely mind-boggling to see how that one event can be just as extreme but as lethal as the other. It's massive. And if we don't wake up to what we're doing, we're going to bring a mutilation and self-destruction upon to our own selves. It could possibly be the end of civilization as we know it if we don't wake up and turn this around. pertaining to the global transformation that continues to get more radical every year. Just wild. Just, I'm talking about bizarre behavior that's coming from Mother Nature in one form or the other, and usually it comes simultaneously, one back to back. But whenever you start having these events start hitting at the same time, you know, kind of like the building of two storms that could turn into two possible hurricanes at the same time, you start scratching your head like maybe there is something going on pertaining to our atmospheric changes in the regards of global warming. And if you can't see that, obviously you're blinded.
About 39%. Containment's been improving here, but again, slowly. And then further north, well, we're also having big concerns there just north of Santa Rosa, where over 200,000 acres have burned there and only 7% containment. And the visibility in some spots around the San Francisco area, air quality is very poor too. Not the best here for those who suffer from respiratory issues. So very dry and drought-stricken Southwest. Here's a quick look at that forecast for today. From San Diego in the low 80s, San Diego up towards LA into the 80s. How about Sacramento and Fresno, though? A bit hotter.
Good luck to all of us.